Hello everyone, it is Caitlin, and today I'm going to teach you 3 different ways to put in eyelets on your 19th century dresses. So eyelets. You see eyelets all over the 19th century. They are used to lace up corsets, fancy belts, dresses, in shaping bustles, and in other ways. If you are planning to lace something up, you're going to need eyelets. So the first type of eyelet we see in the 19th century, and perhaps the one we're most familiar with today, is the metal eyelet. Technically they're grommets, but we're going to call them eyelets for consistency. For what I can tell, metal grommets or eyelets tend to show up starting in the very late 1820s and into the very early 1830s. So prior to that, you're not going to be using metal eyelets. After that, you can. By the mid-1850s, it does seem that metal eyelets, at least on corsetry, is the norm. Which makes sense because metal eyelets are strong and hard wearing. Now I do want to mention that a lot of times those who make reproduction pieces use eyelets or grommets that are far too large. They are very small in this time period. I buy my grommets in bulk from Gold Star Tool, the link is down below in the description, and I use size 000 or size 00. You're also going to need their hammer and anvil setting tool. Another way to do eyelets is, of course, to do them by hand. This is particularly common early on in the 19th century, and it sort of dissipates out, at least in corsetry, by the 1840s and 1850s, but you still see it on fancy belts like the Swiss belts and on gowns. The benefit of using the hand-sewn eyelets is that you can use the thread that matches your dress so they almost become invisible, which is why you see the hand-done ones a lot on clothing items. The third type of eyelet we're going to talk about today is the bone eyelet. You see these most often in corsetry and underwear, up until about the late 1840s, early 1850s. Until recently, we really weren't able to get good reproduction bone eyelets, but there is a source now. Mackenzie Schultz of Fig Leaf Patterns has had them reproduced, and you can buy them from her website, which is listed down below in the description. As always, do research into your garment and your time period to make sure you're doing the type of grommet that would have been seen originally. And with that being said, let's look at some originals. Let's look at this 1860s corset from the Victorian Albert Museum. We can see some lovely metal eyelets on this original. They appear to be black or perhaps tarnished steel. You can get both colors from Gold Star Tool. You can see how small they are and how they are set close to the edge. And then there's this original from the Manchester Art Galleries. This corset is also from the 1860s, and we can see brass eyelet. Gold Star Tool also carries the brass eyelet. The size appears to be similar to the V&A corset, and this is an 1830s corset from the Underpinnings Museum that features the steel eyelets again. And this is an 1825 to 1835 corset from the Victorian Albert Museum. You can see that these eyelets match the white fabric, and they are similar in size to the metal ones, but these are done by hand. These eyelets are made with a buttonhole stitch, which I will show you how to do in a moment. And this is an 1860s corselet belt from a private collection. There is a pattern based on this original done by the owner, and I have linked that below. You can also see the thread matches the red belt. This one is just whipped around instead of doing the buttonhole stitch. And bone eyelets. This is a very early 1800s corset from an auction site that features bone eyelets. You can see these are slightly larger than the metal and hand-done eyelets. And this is an 1839 corset from the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. It features bone eyelets as well. So now that we have seen some originals, let's get started on the how-to part of this video. Welcome to my living room. With a giant center block in it because it is very mosquito-y outside, and I had 10 mosquitoes lined up in my arm when I went outside to do one single eyelet. So we are here inside doing this. So I already have a few set, and types of lacing and how you want to do your lacing is a totally different conversation for a totally different video. I'm choosing to do spiral lacing for this. Is an 1830s corset. That is completely hand sewn because it is the 1830s. We don't have sewing machines yet. So what we are doing is I have marked out with pins where I want my grommets to go. You can use a pencil. You can mark it with one of those little fabric fadeable pins. You know what I'm talking about. You can use one of those too. It doesn't really matter. Just figure out where you want your holes to be. Very important part when you are making grommets. You do not want to cut the fiber. You do not want to cut the hole. That's a mistake I made early on before I knew better. I used to cut my holes because obviously there's a hole in the fabric. Obviously you have to cut that, right? No, you do not cut that. You do not want to cut that. Cutting fabric makes the fibers weak. And so eventually, if you cut it and you'll put this on a raw edge, after pulling it, particularly on a corset, because that takes a lot of strain, it's going to pull out, and that's not what you want. Then you'll be left with a too big hole, because you won't be able to put the grommet that's this size back through the hole, because the hole will, of course, worn and pulled itself out. And so, yeah, definitely don't want to do that. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to push the fibers to make a hole. Let's see, tools real quick to make the metal eyelets. This is called an awl, A-W-L. I bought this one at Walmart. It is not a period correct one, but it works. And I don't ever use my awl outside of my modern house, so to me it's not a big deal. But yeah, this is an awl. It's very pointy and very sharp, so it's going to push those fibers through very well. I find that this is a very narrow awl, and it's not going to get me the size of hole that I need. So in addition to that, I like my size 10 knitting needle. This is really helpful, but it's very dull. So I use this to get the initial hole, and then I will use this. Well, more on that in a moment. Today, what we're going to be using is Gold Star Tool, I believe. They're grommets. These are in size 00. You're going to want to buy the grommets and also the setting tools, which is a two-piece set, and they look like this. And they're very particular per size. So if you choose a different size, like say the 0 size, you're going to need different setting tools. If you have a lot of grommets, you're going to want to label them, which I only ever use this size, so I don't ever label mine, but you'd want to if you order more than one size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all this for a second. Oh, you're also going to need a hammer. This is very important. I'm going to start by putting my awl into my fabric right in the middle of where I want the hole to be, and I'm going to push that, being very careful with it because you don't want to break the fibers, because breaking is the same as cutting. You're going to just push it through. It sometimes can take a little bit, especially if you have multiple layers in here and a very finely woven fabric. It's going to take a little bit of effort. You don't want to break the fibers, as I said, so be very gentle and make sure you're not pushing it too hard. Once you get that hole, if your awl is bigger, you may not need to use the knitting needle, but my awl is pretty small and I can't get this to fit into that hole. So I'm going to just push it a little bit more with my knitting needle, being gentle. There we go. And now I have a nice size hole without breaking any fibers, so that's still a very firm edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my grommet. This is the male side of the grommet, so it's with the long end. I'm going to stick that onto the right side of your fabric. This is the right side of my corset. This is the nice pretty side. And so what you'll see on the back. Now there's two pieces to this grommet. There's these little washers, little itty bitty things. You're going to put that on top. Okay? So now we have grommet fabric washer. We're going to put this whole thing onto our setting tool. And stick the hole right through there. This tool has two ends. There's the flat end, and there's an end with a hole in it. This hole fits on that hole. And then we're going to smash it with a hammer. You can probably do it in like 5 little hits. I usually do like 10, but you don't want to do it too much because sometimes this will get caught and you won't be able to pull it out. But yeah, and there's a grommet. So we'll do that one more time. So hole. Might make my hole bigger. There we go. Grommet onto the right side of the fabric. Turn the whole thing to the wrong side. Oops. Yeah, you do want to make sure there's like no little fibers stuck on there. So there's a fiber stuck. So I'm just going to gently take this little fiber and push it over the side. There we go. So you want a clear hole. Take your washer, put it on, put the whole thing onto the setting tool. This thing, oops, wrong end, and smash it. and pull it off. And that is how you set on metal eyelets. Alright, next type of eyelet. These are bone eyelets. Mackenzie Schultz is reproducing them. They are very good for like early 1800s all the way up until about 1850. Particularly before the whole inventing of the metal eyelets, which I believe they were patented in 1827. So before that, especially, these are going to be awesome, particularly if you don't want to do them by hand. Now I will say these are hard to get in, and it will take you a long time. I think it's worth it. They're more secure than hand-done eyelets. If I was doing something earlier, I would definitely go with these before I went with hand-done eyelets on a corset. But yes, they do take time. And so this is what they kind of look like. It's just this little bone bit, and then there's rings. A lot of times I'll find that there's a thinner ring and a thicker ring. I've been putting the thicker ring on the right side and pushing through with a thinner ring because I think that's easier to get them in. Now, the one good thing about them being difficult to get in is that they're going to be very difficult to pull out because you're not doing any type of crimping, you're not doing any hammering. These literally just sit. So them being very tight is a good thing. So let's go ahead and put this one in. I have it marked out where I want them. I'm going to start with the awl, the same thing as we do with the metal ones. Kind of start our little hole. Okay. Same thing, we're going to use our size 10 knitting needle. And poke that through. And then I have a size 11. And I could probably go bigger and it wouldn't hurt me. But we're going to get this in here. Really kind of push this one through because this is a little bit smaller than I think it needs to be. If you got like a size 12 or 13, I think that's going to be the best bet. You don't want to make the hole too big, but the bigger it is, the easier these things are to get in. I'm going to figure out, there's my thinner one. Oops, dropped it. Thinner area. And then we're just going to poke it through the hole. And we're trying to get it all the way through, and yes, it will take a lot of effort. That one was actually really easy. Oh, look at that. Some of them are a hair smaller than others, and those are easier to get in. By the way, when I get it done, I'll just take it and I'll twist it a few times to kind of heal those, you know, the little hole that I made. But again, just like the metal ones, you do not want to cut these. You want to just pull the fibers apart. So let's do one more. Yeah, the last two I did, it took me 6 minutes to get the two in. Because I filmed those also, and I know how long it took. So yes, it will take a while. But it is doable. Oh, messed that one up. Let's go ahead and go through that hole again. Alright. Yeah, this one's going to be a little bit more difficult. But basically we're just trying to get this through that hole. I'm going to try a smaller one. And it's like a millimeter's a difference, but it makes all the difference, I'm telling you. Just that millimeter smaller. If I had a bigger kneading needle, I would be using that. But size 11 is the largest I have. Okay, so we're over halfway done now. Nearly there, and I'll just pop. Alright, so at this point we're nearly there, so it's going to push that to the side. There you go. That wasn't too bad. Twist it, and that's how you put in bow and eyelets. Alright, for hand done eyelets, I don't have a gown that is using them, so we're going to simulate it with a piece of scrap fabric. So I have here some silk that has lining, and I just fold it in half, kind of like a bodice edge, essentially. So we're going to start off the same way with our awl, and we're going to do both types today, when you just overcast, and then of course the buttonhole stitch, which we're going to do first. So this, again, same thing, we don't want to cut the fibers, we just want to push them apart. If you have a small awl, you're going to want to use a knitting needle, or at least I use a knitting needle, and push it open a little bit more. Okay, so now we have our hole. Now again, you generally are going to want to use the same color thread as your fabric, but you don't have to. I have seen contrast ones. They're just not as common. But I'm going to use contrast today so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to start on the back. Come up. Now I'm going to go back in, go up next to where I came up at, pull it almost all the way through, and put my needle through the loop and pull. So it's just a buttonhole stitch. And go next to that stitch, pull it almost all the way through, needle through the loop, and pull. And keep going in the circle. You don't have to get them perfectly covered. That one went over my pin. So there will be like space out here where it's not covered by thread, and that is okay. Some of your stitches are going to be longer than others. That is okay. I think we're more perfectionists than I think the Victorians were. Oops. And you just keep going around. If you find your hole closing up on you a little bit, go ahead and push your eyelet or your awl back through to give yourself a nice hole again, and then keep going. And I don't believe I mentioned it before, but I am using buttonhole twist for the thread. So it's a little bit thicker than sewing thread. And keep going until you reach back where you started, because you're sewing in the round. Okay, and once you're here, you're going to put your needle through the hole. Oops. Hopefully not catch it on a pin like I did. And just kind of weave that off so your thread doesn't come undone. Right? And there you have a eyelet done with a buttonhole stitch. Next one, we're going to do an overcast one. So I'm going to put my awl through, same thing basically. Very gentle. Do your knitting needle if you need to. Okay. And we're going to go back up just like we did before. So it starts off the same. And we're going to do our needle in and then back out. This time we're just not going to go through the loop. So we're just going to pull it. So these work a lot faster. They're not as secure, or strong, but they're a lot faster. And when you've gone all around, again, go underneath and kind of just weave that off. And there you are, hand-done eyelets. Thank you so much for joining me as we learned about the ways to make eyelets in 19th century clothing. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. As always, have a fantastic week, and I will see you back here on Monday.